Welcome to Hope for Your Pelvic Floor, the podcast where we stop managing women's symptoms and start making sense of their bodies. I'm Claire Sparrow, Pilates educator and pelvic health specialist, best-selling author, and here we talk honestly about what women are told, what the evidence actually says, and how real change happens. This episode's going to be a little bit different today because I want to just share a personal experience that I've had that's created a little bit of thought for me and reflection, I think is fair to say. And it's a little bit about the societal bias that I experienced recently. So we're going to go back in time a little bit to when I had three young boys who were all very active, and I was that mum who just cracked on and did whatever they did and participated in whatever they asked me to. I was definitely that yes mum, especially when it came to the physical stuff, getting on the floor, crawling around, building dens, jumping on the trampoline, going like weaving through the soft play when they were really small, or, the bouncy castle parties. I was always in there with them, laughing and having a really good time. Now they're a little bit older. It's less bouncy castles and bouncy houses and more pickleball or play tennis with me, mum, or play football or soccer. And even now they're playing American football. So there's a lot of catch. Can we play catch, mum? Which means I have to throw, which admittedly I'm not very good at. They're teaching me and they're very patient. But anyway, I can catch pretty good, but throwing, not so much. Anyway, they're playing all these different kind of sports and doing these different activities, and they invite me to get involved. They don't think twice about asking me because we've always done it that way. I've always been that mum. And of course, there was a pause, a moment in time where it was tricky for me. And I had to consider what I did and didn't do when I had my prolapse diagnosis. But I still found a way to be involved. And that was always really important to me, whether it was swinging across the monkey bars in the play park or playing different games that meant I wasn't having to run necessarily or do certain things. And they didn't know any different. I just created and invented a different game for them. Gosh, I guess it was probably about a decade ago that I started to notice that it was actually quite unusual, that it wasn't commonplace for other mummies to just, start diving through the play frame or whatever it might be. And I remember a particular situation where we were at an activity place where all the kids and families were going swimming. And I noticed that were a few mums, and one mum in particular, who was sat on the sidelines and not joining in. And I just felt such a deep sadness that she didn't feel able to participate with her own kids. And it's really sad to think about all those occasions in life for all of us, whether it's that you're not participating with your kids, or maybe it's affecting your sex life, or maybe you're not able to go and do activities with friends that you want to do, going to play netball again, or it could be that you're struggling to pick up your grandchildren. Whatever the thing is that is making you step back and feel like you're on the sidelines and you're not able to participate, it's deeply, deeply sad. And the experience that I've had recently kind of made me realize that it's not just inside of us that we have that feeling that we don't participate, we sit on the sidelines. Because what I experienced was that there was an assumption culturally in this situation that I was in, that because I was the mum, maybe because I am a certain age, whatever, that I was there to drop off, not to participate. And it really stopped me in my tracks. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what happened. And recently, obviously my boys are getting bigger, so the activities that they want to do have changed, but I'm still kind of, yes, I'll do whatever you want to do, just to be involved. And my middle one wanted to try snowboarding, which is fantastic. I was like, yeah, of course, let's look at what our options are. I had snowboarded, children ago. So long the time I was working out, golly, it must have been 25 years since I got on a snowboard. And I used to skateboard and snakeboard and other activities. And of course, already I do paddleboard and I like to wild swim and those things. And so I thought, okay, sure, let's do this. We're going to have some fun together. Let's see what happens. So I booked us to go for a lesson, a group thing where it's sort of like a beginner's class, essentially. So we get 2 hours of learning how to use the board, how to stop, how to be safe, on the board, just on a little tiny little slope, which is fantastic. And we arrived at the venue for this activity. And I just want to preface this with that I'm not making any judgment or criticism in any way. It just is an interesting observation that I made when we went to this activity, that more than 3 people assumed that the lesson was for my son. Nobody of all the different sort of steps along the way, nobody assumed that we were doing it as a shared activity together. And it really caught me a little bit off guard. I'm not going to lie. Like, I actually felt old and I felt a bit like, is it because I am a woman of a certain age and perimenopausal, and is it because I'm, the mum, and what is the bracket they're putting me in that makes them think that I wouldn't be there to do the snowboarding? And of course, my son is also sort of surprised too, because he knows this is just how we roll. We do stuff like this together. And then we started to see parents, and not just mummies, it was mummies and daddies too, dropping off their young people, 16, 17-year-olds and younger, and then going off away, leaving them to do the activity rather than joining in, having a laugh, falling on their bum, which I definitely did. I'm not going to lie. I definitely fell and laughed hysterically, but we had the most amazing time. It didn't faze me really. It paused me for a moment, and I guess it did. If I'm really honest, I felt that churny wobbly feeling in my tummy because they were surprised I was there. I suddenly questioned whether it was appropriate for me to be there. Am I going to be able to do this, or am I going to fall in a bad way? Am I going to just be completely incapable? And obviously, am I going to embarrass my son? Because, naturally we embarrass our children. I face that reality, but I didn't want to embarrass him more than just normal being a mum embarrassment. So we did. We went. We had our 2-hour snowboard lesson. And my son said to me at the end, he said, "You were actually really good, Mum." And, I wasn't the worst person in the lesson by far. After the 2-hour lesson, towards the end, I was starting to have some movement memory and feel quite good about it. And the other thing, in that entire time, I didn't think about going to the toilet. Am I going to wee myself? I didn't think about prolapse stuff. I just had a really good, fun experience. I learned a new skill. Yes, I did it a long, long time ago, but this method of learning it was very different. Just the way that the process that they taught. And it was great to be in that situation with my son, watching him like really concentrating and learning, and for me to have that experience of learning, being a beginner again, and being in life, not on the sidelines of it, not dropping my son and assuming that I can't do it, but just giving it a go anyway. Admittedly, I couldn't get myself up the hill on the rope pulley thing, but I didn't waste time with that because I thought, you know what? if I keep falling about just trying to hold this tiny rope thing to get up this tiny hill, it's then going to undermine what could be a positive experience. So I just walked up the hill. It wasn't even a hill. It was not a hill. So that I could get on with what was important. And that was a really kind of important mindset shift for me, that it wasn't about, can I pulley up here, that one bit. I wasn't going to let that one bit hold me back. What I wanted was to just do the lesson, just work on the skills, and could I do this and have fun with my son? So here we are. That was my experience and the thoughts that I had around being reminded of how many women do sit on the sidelines. And is it just because they feel like, do you feel like you can't do a thing because of your pelvic health? Or is it also because society says mums stay on the sideline, women of a certain age stay on the sidelines, women who are older just don't do these things? And obviously, you know what my bias is. I want to look at what we can do, what is possible. And age, I get the question so often from women about, am I too old to make a difference to my prolapse or to my pelvic floor, my incontinence? And we know so much more now about neuroplasticity and our ability to continue to heal throughout our entire life. It's our body's design. And so the answer is always yes. There is always potential for change, for improvement. I always say there is hope for your pelvic floor for that very reason, because there is something you can do. And even in those situations where I had my prolapse symptoms, where they were, it was the immediate aftermath of that diagnosis, and I just sort of froze up and was so tight and everything just felt terrible. And I felt like there was a lot of things I couldn't do. I also found a way in to things that I could do. I got creative with things so that I could still do things. So I guess maybe my point today for you to take away is, what are you saying no to that maybe you could say yes to, that you're assuming you can't do something, or you can't do the whole thing, so you don't do any, but you could do one part of it? Or is there a societal bias, like all the people assuming that I was just going to drop my son off for a lesson and not join in? Is there a bias that you are unaware of, that by listening to this conversation, it could maybe highlight that bias that's happening around you, and maybe you could say yes to something? Maybe there is a desire that you have where you could funnel it down to the lowest common denominator. What's the lowest step on that rung? What's the lowest hanging fruit, the easiest step that you could make? And remember, I had incontinence. I had a pelvic organ prolapse, and I have worked on that. I have been able to resolve my prolapse and my incontinence, and I can do the things that I want to do without the fear and worry. And it's not because I did that 10 years ago and then forgot about it. It's because I do stuff every day to support myself so that I can do these activities, whatever it might be. And of course, maybe you're like, what? Snowboarding? That's an extreme sport. That's not for me. I am not suggesting that you snowboard. I'm just sharing my experience, my life, where I'm at in my world. And that is what I'm saying yes to. For you, maybe it's actually going on a 5-mile charity walk that you really want to do. And you need to learn how to wild wee so that you can go behind a bush when you know you need to go, and make that plan accordingly. So instead of saying, oh, well, I can't walk for 5 miles without, or 5K without going for a wee, so I'm not going to do it. It's looking at, okay, well, how could I do it? What steps could I take to be able to do it? So we do big walks when we're in Scotland, and I have in my little backpack, I have a little Ziploc bag with my hand sanitizer, my wipes, my tissues, and a little like obviously we've got the dog, so we have dog poo bags. So if I need to go for a wee, I will not leave anything there. So I will bag up in the dog bag. So I take it away with me, my rubbish. Because I want to take away the barriers to going for that long walk. And sometimes, and I've heard this from quite a few women where I've given this like silly advice before, where they've done the little baggy, little Ziploc and they've taken that in their pocket. And what's happened is it's given them the confidence. And they've not even needed to have the wee, but they've known that they could if they needed to. I've taught women how to squat, how to hold on to a tree, how to hold a chum, hold a friend and go. Because we need to find ways to say yes to the activities that get us off the sidelines and into our lives, living our lives. Wow. So that's my little story for today. A little bit of a different episode today, but this just happened yesterday. It's so fresh for me and it just felt so important to remember that we don't need to be on the sidelines, that you can say yes to things, maybe even in the small parts of an activity. Thank you so much for listening to me again today in another episode of Hope for Your Pelvic Floor. And if there's one thing I want you to take from today, it's this. You don't need to be on the sidelines. There are things you can do, and you can ask for more from your pelvic floor. There is hope for your pelvic floor. And just a gentle reminder from me that if you are enjoying these conversations, you can subscribe wherever you're listening, and it's easier for other women to find this podcast when you do. And I will look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.